Good morning, everyone. This is Will Mosley. I create films, podcasts, and blog articles about the creative process. I'm a creative director. I got my start back in graphic, or really fine art, then graphic design, web design. Um, Running over the fire, or not fire hose, the water hose coming down the hill. And then eventually video production. So took a scenic route of all the creative spots, and here I am. And I guess you can consider this also audio production too. Today's podcast is actually specifically going to be about audio, and what I mean by that is music, soundtracks, things that make up films. You don't realize, as a viewer, how dramatically a soundtrack affects a film or builds to a moment until you don't have the music, when you're in that creative process. And I found myself in that situation, I think, yesterday, where I stumbled upon a stock service that had really gross, cheesy corporate music. And I was just looking for something to, just looking for something good. And I was like, wow, these selections are horrible. And it brought me back to the days of when I didn't know how to find good soundtracks and good music for my films. We're talking about that after the break. Okay, if you have a, Instagram or a Facebook or a YouTube or a LinkedIn or a Twitter, if you have any social account and you have a business account, or you're trying to just promote yourself, it's kind of a good idea to have a really nice promotional film about yourself, about your business, about your products. I know it's not feasible for all to have like a new film every month, and that's created by an agency or whatever. But it is a good idea to have at least one film that you can put on your website, one film that can be put on your social media page, one film that can go on all the feeds. And that's what I do. I create promotional films that just look slick, that sound good, that don't require you to do too much work. I just gotta interview you, and I'll do all the hard work, to make you look good. So if you need that, I'm available on the weekends, specifically Saturday, and we can get started. So go over to heywillmosley.com. Again, that's heywillmosley. Mosley, Mosley, not Mosley. Mosley. And let's make it happen. All right. So audio. I've talked a little bit about, starting out on, I think I started out on the Rebel T6 and switched over to the iPad Pro and went to the SL2 from there. All of these pretty much had bad audio, but I'm not going to talk about the audio waves in a camera file today. I want to talk about what happens when you get back to the studio or back to your house from a long day's shoot. And this is specifically probably for more filmmakers, so I'm not gonna be too technical, but I'm not gonna be there's probably a little bit of jargon in here. You get back, you get your stuff, you put your stuff on your timeline. I actually did this last night, and you don't know where to begin, right? You have a whole bunch of footage. Maybe the amount of footage isn't overwhelming. That's good, but you don't know where to begin. And where I always begin after getting it laid out on the timeline is with music. It is the all-time absolute necessity to get me in the groove and get me into the mindset to make this film, what this film is going to feel like, no pun intended, film feel. And I head over to epidemicsound.com. It begins, I'm sure even if you spell it wrong, when you search it in Google, it'll come up. They're pretty poppin' nowadays. Epidemic Sound is different than a lot of stock music that you'll hear, that you're probably used to hearing. Back, 4 or 5 years ago, the options for a okay soundtrack were like Audio Jungle, where you'd pay $30 for one track that was kind of cheesy, and away you go. You just make that one track work, and that was it. Right now I'm kind of waiting for a pedestrian. Like, there's a pull out, there's a person crossing, there's a person going forward, and I guess I'll just be the last person. Let this person come out. Well, I hope this person doesn't hit me and hope they see me. Ooh, that is bad. Okay, sorry, had to pass a trash can that was tipped over, traffic jam, all that. Audio Jungle was really the only fairly okay option, and when I say okay, I mean it. Still, just think of those commercials. Dun, 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 dun. I'm not good at sound effects, so, but. And so when I came around this Epidemic Sound, I was a bit skeptical. I had heard several of good YouTubers that I respect and like mention Epidemic Sound, and eventually I was like, you know what? Let me go ahead and check this out, because I do need good soundtracks for my films. Note that all this isn't like sponsored or anything. I just love Epidemic Sound. It's dope. I head over there, and to be honest, when I first signed up for a subscription, I was all amped. I was getting a subscription. The first screen I was presented by was like, whoa, bus, you're super close. Was like a how do you describe it? It seems like it would be a good idea, but it wasn't for me to begin with. Like, it's a filter section where you can filter out music by mood and by energy and by settings, stuff like that. It seems like a great idea, like a really cool way to do it. But I found myself getting really lost in whatever their library was, and it would take me to soundtracks that were kind of similar to like that corporate-y thingy that I was trying to avoid. So I was actually the first time I used it, I was like, what the hell? It's like, why did I pay for this subscription? By the way, the subscription's like $15 a month. It's pennies to what it's worth. But luckily they had another tab right up top in the menu that says albums. This is what I always go to. I click on albums, and they have all their recently, released albums / songs. And these aren't just like, these are musical artists that have dedicated their craft to creating music. Just like you'd hear a musical artist on the radio, the same thing applies. These people, they get it. They're not making cheesy music. They're making real music. And so the benefit of that is that you can use this really nice, crafted, fine-tuned, just beautiful music, whether it's rap or dubstep or rock or hip-hop or pop, anything that you're used to probably listening to on the radio. Like, there's really good artists on here. And I mean, and I guess I should correct myself. What you're hearing on the radio, you're probably not going to hear on Epidemic Sound. But I'm saying the quality of the artist are just the same. So what does that mean for your film? A couple of things, right? You never want to worry if you don't have the copyrights to a soundtrack, a musical soundtrack. That's just something that you don't want to worry about. It's the same thing with stock footage or stock photography, all that stuff. You need to have the rights to it. Don't just copy and paste and whatever, and then later on, you're getting in trouble for it. Just a bad look. Epidemic Sound allows you to use all of their music, like an unlimited amount, all of their soundtracks for a low $15 subscription. And so that means that you don't have, like, I remember the days where I'd think, like, okay, for this film I'm going to make this one song work. And hey, sometimes one song can work for your film. But a lot of times I use 3 to 7 soundtracks in a film, just depending on the mood as it flows. And that's what's cool about it, is depending on how your film is flowing, you can go onto Epidemic Sound and be like, yep, let me find something dark and, grungy, or let me find something cinematic, or let me find something just chill. And that's what I do all the time for all my films. And a lot of you guys have been like, damn, Will, like, that's like the music in here is crazy. It's really good. It's a combination of Epidemic Sound and also knowing when and how to use the music in your film. And that's what I want to talk about in the next part of this. So if you've been listening to the podcast, whether you're listening to the podcast on Apple Music or Spotify or somehow on my blog or SoundCloud, do me a favor and head over to my YouTube channel. If you search Hey Will Mosley, Mosley, Hey Will Mosley, on YouTube, I'll come up. Click on one of my videos and click subscribe. It'd help a ton. I'd love you for it, like, for real. And if you're not about the YouTube life, I am all up on Instagram. It's dope. I think most people love it nowadays. Honestly, I think more people just use it over Facebook now. Crazy enough. Okay, just go over there, like, subscribe, and if you're feeling extra special, because I love when I get comments, give me a comment on one of my films. Thanks. Okay, so you've downloaded some music from Epidemic Sound. You figured out what the vibe and feel that you're wanting for your film. How do you make that make sense in your film? Like, I don't know, that was the second part that I was just confused and daunted by. I was like, I got this great soundtrack. Now, how do I use it properly without it sounding horrible with all my other stuff? Well, typically what you want to do is, and this is probably the easiest route, there's plenty of other ways you can do this, but this is typically what I do. When I get my footage on the timeline, right now I'm literally editing a film, Dead or Alive is what I'm calling it, I think that's what I'm going to stick with. And the first bit of clips are of just pretty much my kids playing on the porch. Just pretty much how a normal weekend day starts off. It's dope. Now, I have a couple options here. I could just let the sound be on for all the clips of them playing, which, it's cool. I like that. But a better way to do it, a better way to really build, especially if you have a soundtrack that really matches, is the first 30 seconds or so. Pretty much take the volume down on all of those clips. It doesn't have to be all of them, but for the most part, most of them. And if you were intentional enough to shoot in 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second, go ahead and slow your footage down, by 50%. I'm using Final Cut Pro. Or by 25% if you shot at 120 frames per second. And then lastly, what that's going to do, like, so say you had a minute or even, probably a minute worth of clips, right? That were that first kind of sequence. You highlighted them, you kind of slowed them down. That means that's like 2 minutes worth of clips, or 4 minutes if it's 120 frames per second. You don't want those clips going on for 4 minutes, trust me. So what you're going to do is you're going to highlight all of those, and you're going to change the duration on those to 1 second or 2 seconds, or maybe even 3. I usually go with 2 seconds for any of my B-roll, and then kind of adjust as I see fit. And then what happens is that those 4 minutes roughly go down to like 30 seconds or something, or maybe even less than that. I don't know. I'm not at a computer right now, and I'm not trying to be a math whiz, but it works. Now what you do is what you have is slow motion clips. If you took the time to shoot in 60 frames or 120, you throw the soundtrack right underneath from the beginning, and you literally just pretty much let it play for 30 seconds. Clip it roughly around 30 seconds. It doesn't have to be at 30 seconds, but typically where the song kind of starts to try to go into the next verse or something, or not, it starts to go into the next thing, or maybe your footage just ends, abruptly. You can cut it right there. Go ahead and play it back, and I guarantee you it's going to be magic. You're like, fuck, okay. This automatically just looks really good. Yeah. And it feels much better, and it flows much better than if you didn't have that soundtrack. That's the magic of just music in general. It can hide a lot of errors that you have. It can emphasize a lot of the mood and the feelings that you might have not felt right then and there. It does a lot. Now, I like to take it, a couple steps further. There's a few things that I do. A lot of times I want to give to the ambience of the mood. I like to have a mix of like clips that are silent, and then clips that are, clips that have regular audio, because it kind of builds to, like, you have the soundtrack playing, and then you hear kids playing for a second, like and so it pieces it together in your mind. It sells it so much better, but it gets rid of all the extra. Maybe there's a lawnmower going in the background. Maybe the kids are crying. There's plenty of things that could be going on. Just mix it up and have fun. And you can do this. I do this. Soundtracks can be overused and overplayed. So I guess I'll talk about that in this next part. So how do you get just the right amount of soundtracks in your film without the whole thing just being music? I've made this mistake plenty of times before too, where I literally let a soundtrack play for 2 minutes, and I turn down the volume on most of my clips, and there's some nice slow-mo. I'm telling you, after about 45 seconds, maybe less than that, people start to like wane. They're like, oh, okay, alright. Unless you have a very, very beautiful vocal soundtrack, and you're trying to sell like an emotional kind of experience, that's still, I've found that works. But for the most part, people just you're like, okay, I get it. So it's always good to mix that soundtrack stuff up with like the moment. So you bring them back to the moment, and so usually you have someone talking head something. You are going about on you're doing whatever the action is that's part of your film. You're kind of doing that stuff and whatever. And then when there's another scene where you just have a lot of footage that's just really nicely shot, then you can switch back to get another soundtrack, or maybe even use the same soundtrack. Just up to you. How this usually looks on my timeline is I let it flow super organically. If there's if I see my head, if there's like a heads, then I'm not playing music. But if there's nice shots that I'm shooting of the car, the van, or the whatever it is, then yeah, I'm throwing on some music, playing that, and it builds on top of each other. Okay, so I know that was a bit, I guess it's short for a podcast, but a bit long. I feel like I rambled a little bit, but I'm hoping that this helps you with adding soundtracks to your films, because trust me, it's an understatement to say how important they are to really taking your filmmaking to the next level. So like I said, epidemicsound.com. That's epidemic with an E. And it's like $15. It's only a monthly thing. So if you hate it for some reason, you just can cancel it. But I love it. Alright, I hope you guys have a great morning, great walk, great work day. If you're listening to this, hell, you might be in the bathroom right now. I hope everything is great. Honestly. Remember, if you need a film, go over to heywillmosley.com and please check me out. Or let your friends know. Like, if you don't need one, but you know someone that does, share this podcast or share any of the stuff that I've made with them, or, send them over to heywillmosley.com. Just, whatever. Catch you in the next one. Bye.